Opium, turkey, basically the same thing. Hey, Jazz, what are we talking about today?
Well, supposedly something about opium, but I would like you to remind me.
Well, yeah, I've been really interested in the Opium Wars, there were two of them. Well, there were a bunch, but two in particular were the Anglo-Chinese War. This is. Well, did you know opium is created by cutting open the seeds of poppy seeds? And the Arrow War, separated by the Treaty of Nanking. But you were saying? Because they're actually quite large. And you cut open the seed, and you just kind of let the sap run out and harden. And then, legally, we can't tell you how to do the rest.
Did you research how to do the rest?
No.
Good. I would be extremely worried, my friend, because the effects of opium on the body are not a pleasant thing. Or, well, they are a pleasant thing, but they're also not. Because, it was originally used as a painkiller. Its opioid cousin heroin was originally sold as, I do believe, cough medicine. It is not cough medicine. So, opioids often have addictive properties, can enhance problems in the liver, and it's not known to cause any direct effects, but it's still illegal due to the addictive properties, and it is often taken in combination with other drugs, which worsens the effect of the other drugs because it's another drug in your system. And on a slightly embarrassing note, opium causes bowel distress, and it could go one of two ways for somebody. It can cause them to be constipated, or it causes them to have diarrhea, more often trending towards constipated. Just think of the kind of dishonored a bit betrayed the Chinese felt when they were being traded this thing that was, marketed as a painkiller, but got the people addicted to it, and also now they are pooing uncontrollably.
Well, yeah, opium was used as a painkiller and medicinally in general for thousands of years, not in opium, in China.
There is no country called opium. There is, however, one called Turkey.
Opium, turkey, basically the same thing. Because they both put you in a light, dreamy state.
How does turkey put you in a light, dreamy
state? The tryptophan will flamin'.
Tryptophan. Got it.
In Europe, did you know opium could be dissolved in beer, wine, or vinegar and taken as an infusion?
Ew.
Yeah, that is.
That sounds grody.
So what is the black market? Because we've been throwing that term around. Well, we've been alluding to a black market.
Well, I was gonna introduce it. So,
mind reader.
But essentially, the opium trade was originally legal because not everybody in China, but most people in China thought, hey, okay, this is a medicine. It's good. It's fine. The people are taking it. And we don't have to modernize because these people are just happy trading opium with us. The legality of it came into question, and the definition, and this is where we start to mention black markets, because the definition of a black market by Merriam-Webster, thank you all great and powerful Merriam-Webster, is illicit trade in goods or commodities in violation of official regulations, or a place where such trade is carried on. Or the simplified version of that would be a system through which things are bought and sold illegally. So, throughout most of Europe at that time, opium was already illegal because of the adverse effects of it, or at least highly questioned. China? No, because they had not modernized yet, and everybody was trying to force them to modernize. So, now they're being sold opium. And this is early 19th century?
Yeah. This is, early 19th century.
Wait, so poppy seed tea is illegal. Why not a poppy seed bagel?
They're delicious and nutritious.
And lemon poppy seed muffins are not nutritious, really, but they're still delicious. So I guess that works. Opium as a painkiller, well, modern science is not entirely sure how painkillers work exactly yet, or at least not as far as I have attempted to research, which is fairly far. Well, its ingredients are used. Like, one of its ingredients is codeine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've taken things with codeine before.
Yeah, and that's still used. But opium itself, with all of its own combined chemicals, is extremely addictive and might be a good thing for a while, but not for long term.
Yeah, I understand.
So, it's effective. Oh no. And it's like, and we're not saying that, black markets have never been necessary, because they have been. They've been necessary before in history, because there were instances in Japan, and let me just pull up the name, because I can never... the Zaibitsu?
Yeah.
The Zaibatsu, sorry. But they were, like, companies and monopolies that were 19th century. A lot of stuff takes place in the 19th century. Industrialization, woo. But these companies went out of business and were sold for really, really cheap. Kind of almost quasi-legally cheap. So, and these families who own these really rich companies often cornered the market and had monopolies that were actually very similar to the ones in America, except these monopolies went unchecked for so long and were not caught early enough, so they ended up becoming most of the economy. And they ended up literally choking out all other competition. So Japan's economy up and depended on these until the mid-20th century, when reforms were made to try and stop them. Didn't. And I don't know if they're still going on today, but many of them did reform after attempting a breakdown. And one of these companies was actually, I do believe, Mitsubishi.
Huh.
You know what? I'm tired. Opium makes you tired. I'm not on opium. I'm just on a lack of sleep. So, any long-lasting effects of the Opium Wars?
Lasting effects of the Opium Wars. We're still kind of fighting them.
Well, yeah, because it's like people in all sorts of countries are still addicted to opium, and that kind of sucks. And wait, hold on, when was opium discovered?
It's always been there to an extent, because it was used medicinally even in the Stone Ages. Well, not the Stone Ages. Just after the Neolithic Revolution.
The British and Indian Opium Wars are the ones that, like, where opium was first used for a really malicious purpose, where it's like there were likely users, like, here, there, everywhere, because people put stuff in their mouths. That's just how history works. But it's like...
Young humanity was just like a baby. I'm gonna put it in my mouth.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's like, I'm pretty sure that the first Opium Wars were the ones... heck, the first, like, initiating of the conflict over opium was one of the first times that, on a large scale, opium had been used in a somewhat shady, shifty, or malicious manner. But the lasting effect of that was that it did create an opium trade, and unfortunately, that trade has been a lucrative trade, a not legal trade, therefore it is a black market, but...
Well, since we're talking about black markets throughout history, why don't we talk about narcotic control? Because that's always been interesting. There was a heroin epidemic among U.S. troops in the last years of the Vietnam War.
Well, I'm not surprised. It was a very abysmal war, so of course it would cause them to want to use drugs.
Yeah, I mean, that's where things like PTSD come from.
By the way, just for the viewers who probably don't know, but heroin and opium, if we haven't said this before, are both in the same class and are both classified as opioids. So that's why, if we're talking about heroin, it's going to be often in relation to opium or vice versa. So, just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah, it's cool.
Back to the Vietnam War, which was depressing. That apparently evolved opium in some manner and was, in fact, a war.
I think everything has involved drugs in some way.
It's certainly something that would elevate conflict, which, once again, going back to the first Opium Wars, it's kind of like, okay, we could have avoided this if Britain decided not, to be petty and attempt to, gain their own sphere of influence and force China to modernize, because for whatever reason, nobody could accept that China just wanted to be China.
Yeah, I mean, people need to let China live.
Why did everybody want to have so much influence in China?
Because China was the new and shiny thing. And everyone is distracted by new and shiny.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, if they could, somehow get parts of China under their control, well, at that point, imperialism is the new and popular thing to do. So it's just kind of like, hey, if we can have control over this relatively large landmass, well, that's going to look really impressive and good, and we now have more power. But it's like Britain was already, I do believe this is the point in history, roughly, where Britain was already, oh no, that comes later. There's eventually a point where Britain does lose control of its colonies because it does get too large to govern, and they're trying to fight off too many revolutions all at once, I do believe.
Shang Long wrote a letter to King George III in 1793, and he basically said, hey, King, I don't see you as a king, and I don't want your stupid Western products. Leave us alone.
For Britain, that was a spit in the face.
It was, and that's part of the reason Britain was so petty as to say, hey, we're just going to get all your people addicted to drugs.
Yeah, what kind of moral state I've noticed that. As history has gone on, it's been less of an enforced moral state. It's gotten better but worse. There's less primal crime, but there's more, mental, subtle crime. Moral state, were the leaders of Britain in to have gotten just so upset to just try and ruin the lives of millions of people?
Yeah, I understand why you're saying that, but I think it's almost a bigger problem now with globalization, and you can get real fear-mongering going, and propaganda. Propaganda plays a huge role.
Well, yeah, because no one would go on the internet and lie. Who would do something like that?
Yeah.
But it's the whole stigma about the Chinese being addicted to opium all the time is just flat out false. There are so many plays, and often English plays, about the Chinese, and actually often lumping in the Japanese with them. Just anybody of Asian descent in general is grouped in as being these drug addicted, shifty, and that's just not true. Admittedly, yes, opium in the open wars of the not the 1900s, but the 19th century, affected millions and millions of Chinese people, but that didn't make them bad people or necessarily really shifty. They're kind of more victims. Think of their bowels, man. Their bowels.
Think of the bowels.
It is hard to be shifty when your bowels are literally exploding.
Mm-hmm. And trust me, as someone who suffers from a lower intestinal issue, it's hard to be shifty when your bowels are exploding.
Oversharing. I love you.
I love you too. But yeah, this has been a time so far. So let's kind of recap. I don't remember what we've talked about, so we haven't talked about. But let's kind of dive into the First Opium War.
So, First Opium War is...
Here, I will send you the link that I am currently looking at.
Alright. But First Opium War is Britain and China, because Britain wants to have a sphere of influence in China and is willing to play dirty.
It's a really long link. I'm sorry.
I don't know. It kind of made me laugh. It's good.
I'll also send you the password to get in.
Oh, there's a password?
Yeah, because it's a database. It's Best Friends Day.
We are off topic.
So, from the middle of the 18th century, which is the 1700s, because I always mess that up, from about the 1700s to 1750s, around there, foreign traders in China had to abide by this thing called the Canton system, which basically says, hey, there's only this one port, and you guys can only legally do business there.
Well, that's obviously not going to happen due to because of the massive landmass that China is, and how many people there were there. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and so King George III was all like, and I quote, however, Britain had one thing that China really wanted, and that was opium. And so in India, where during the Raj, other British merchants, once in about 1813, when the East Indian Company lost its monopoly over the trade with India, other British merchants began growing opium and saying, hey, China, you want some of this? People in China were like, hey, opium's pretty cheap, and it makes us feel good, so let's smoke it. They needed to find a way to say, hey, kids, don't do drugs. And so they basically said, hey, we're going to start an anti-opium program.
And what would that program entail?
Basically what our modern-day DARE does. DARE, but better, because they arrested people and said, hey, buddy pals, you're not going to do that, or you're going to die.
So, essentially, it was like, winners don't do drugs. And if they did drugs, they got arrested.
Yeah.
And arrested in the 19th century was not as pleasant as it is now. And now is not pleasant, so.
Britain was just, one of their British guys was driving his boat, and he's like, hey, buddy pal, look, a fleet of Chinese ships headed right for us. And then they, captured the boat. And, this Chinese guy wrote a letter to Queen Victoria. Basically what he said is, naturally you would not wish to give unto others what you do not want yourself. We have also heard that the ships coming to Canton had all regulations proclamated and given to them, which stated that it is not permitted to carry contraband goods. Only because the trading ships are numerous, therefore perhaps they have not been examined with care. But this guy didn't realize, the British government was like, hey, yeah, go sell opium. So, afterwards, when the ship was captured, the Britons sent a bunch of ships, and China's like, hey, you wanna remove your ships? And Britain's like, no, fam, we're good. Just gonna keep my ships here until you give me back my ship. Because Britain and her navy, the only romance I care about. When the British reached Nanking in 1842, the Emperor was kind of like, oh, you're right, buddy, I'll just make a deal with you. And Britain, in this treaty, gained the rights to 5 port cities, and the island of Hong Kong was handed over to them, and Kohong was abolished. Hong Kong is governed, according to BBC, Hong Kong is governed under the principle of one country, two systems, in which China has agreed to give the region a high degree of autonomy and to preserve its economic and social systems for 50 years. And then it's like mine.
Huh.
But Hong Kong considers itself its own country. However, the Treaty of Nanking didn't address opium at all. And after the Chinese government gave the British money for messing them up.
Because they had, what could they do? They had lost to the British Navy, so, and they had already signed the treaty. So. And
so the Second Opium War began, which, if I recall correctly, is a repeat of the First Opium War.
Yeah, so it's not like World War I and World War II where there were different...
These were back-to-back.
Yeah.
And so, eventually the opium trade was legalized.
So it went from being legal to kind of illegal to legal
Very
again?
illegal to, I guess, legal. So is there anything else you would thinking of for pertaining to this topic?
For Britain and China specifically?
Or no, just black markets in general throughout black market drug trade.
Yeah, sounds, hey, and we'll be doing more of these. There's more where that came from.
Yeah,
Bye.
so thanks. Have a great life. Bye.